The closer people get to retirement, the more their questions shift from growth to meaning. Not in a dramatic way, more like a quiet curiosity that shows up in the background. They'll open up their statements, look at their balances, maybe plug a few things into an online calculator, and there's this quiet thought they don't always say out loud. Is $1.5 million enough to retire at 60, or am I just hoping it is? And I've seen that moment enough times to recognize what's really happening. It's not a question about money, it's a question about certainty, about whether the life you've been imagining actually lines up with the resources in front of you. What makes it more difficult is that $1.5 million sits in the strange middle ground. It's meaningful, you can feel the weight of it, but it's not so high that the answer feels obvious. And that's where the discomfort comes from. You're not asking, can I retire? You're asking, can I retire and feel confident while I'm doing it? Hi, I'm Tom Porteous, Senior Investment Advisor at BPS Wealth Management at Canaccord Genuity. And if you'd like to see how this applies to your own plan, you're welcome to book a quick call. The link is below. Here's the perspective I've gained after years of walking people through this exact question. The number itself doesn't decide anything. $1.5 million can absolutely support a retirement at 60, but only if it's coordinated around your life, not just your spreadsheet. Something interesting tends to happen when people approach 60. The question, do I have enough, starts blending with a deeper fear. What if I retire too early and regret it? Not because of money, but because of uncertainty. You can see it in the way people talk about their savings. They'll reference the number, but what they're really describing is the responsibility of it. The idea that this pool of money, however big or small, now has to do the work their income used to do for them. And when you retire at 60, that pool has a long journey ahead of it. It might need to carry you through 30 years, maybe more, 3 whole decades, where markets rise and fall, where spending shifts, where health changes, where tax rules evolve, and where the life you want today won't be the same that you're going to experience or want when you're 75 or 85. That's why the $1.5 million question is so hard to answer, because the money is only part of the equation. The timing is the part most people overlook. Retiring at 60 isn't the same thing as retiring at 65 or 67. You're stepping into a stretch of time where the income sources don't arrive all at once. You may be drawing from savings for years before CPP and OAS begin. You may still be carrying taxable income from investments that behave differently than you'd expected. And the choices you make in that window, that first 10 to 12 years of retirement, often shape the next 20. I once worked with someone who came in feeling confident they could retire at 60 with about $1.3 million. Their spending was reasonable, their investments were well structured. But when we looked closely, the risk wasn't the total amount. It was the sequence of withdrawals they were planning. They were unintentionally setting themselves up for higher tax rates later, larger forced RRIF withdrawals, and less flexibility when their spending increased. The number wasn't the problem. The structure was, and that's the part most people don't like to hear. Not because it's bad news, but because it's unclear. It feels easier to chase a number than it does to build a plan. But confidence in retirement doesn't come from the dollar amount. It comes from knowing how that dollar amount behaves across different chapters of your life. And those chapters matter. The early years, say 60 to 70, tend to be your most active. You travel more, you spend more freely, you try new things, you say yes more often. Then your spending naturally tapers. Not because you're holding back, just because life changes shape. And then, later on, new expenses tend to appear. Health, care, family, friends, support for adult children or grandchildren, unexpected transitions. Your $1.5 million needs to move with each of those chapters, not perfectly, but intentionally. And that's where coordination becomes more important than the size of your nest egg. Your RSPs convert to RRIFs. Your minimum withdrawals start increasing. Your investment income fluctuates. Your OAS becomes sensitive to thresholds you may not even know exist. Your CPP timing decision shapes the stability of your later years. Your TFSA becomes a tool for smoothing volatility, not something to protect for 30 years. Every one of these pieces interacts, and that interaction is what determines whether 1.5 million feels tight or feels more than enough. Here's something most people almost never factor in. Retiring at 60 requires a transition from earning to withdrawing, and that shift feels very different emotionally than it does mathematically. When you're earning, the rhythm is predictable. Spend, save, repeat. When you retire, the rhythm reverses. Save becomes withdraw. Withdraw becomes sustain, and sustain becomes manage. That psychological adjustment is one of the biggest challenges people underestimate. Even with 1.5 million or 2 million or more, people hesitate. They wonder if they're doing the right thing. They wonder if they should spend more or spend less. They wonder if they're making decisions that the future self will question. And that's why structure matters so much. It gives you permission to live your life without second-guessing every choice. A clear income strategy gives you permission. A coordinated tax plan gives you permission. A flexible withdrawal plan gives you permission. A timeline that connects your 60s to your 90 gives you permission. That's when confidence replaces fear. Because here's the truth people rarely admit. Most retirement fears aren't financial, they're structural. People aren't worried about running out of money. They're worried about not knowing how to use it properly. When you retire at 60, your money needs to last. But more importantly, it needs to last in a way that lets you enjoy the best years of your life, not tiptoe through them. That doesn't come from a number. It comes from seeing your plan clearly. The spending, the timing, the tax flow, the transitions, the entire arc of your retirement, not just the entry point. So let me leave you with this perspective. Instead of asking, is 1.5 million enough? Instead ask, what do I need this 1.5 million to do for me? And in what order? That's when the real answer shows up. Because 1.5 million may or may not be enough on its own, but aligned with your lifestyle, your health, your timing, your taxes, and your spending rhythm, it can absolutely carry you through a long, fulfilling retirement. And often it can do more for your comfort and certainty than you'd expect. At some point, financial planning stops being about growing your wealth and starts being about arranging it wisely. If you want a second opinion on your plan, or you don't have one and you think you should, book a time with me using the link in the description below.